One. All right, we are very honored to have with us member of Canadian Parliament Anthony Housefather. You are an extremely impressive person. When I was looking you up, 2 law degrees, a business degree, and a member of the Canadian Parliament, and so much more representing Montreal. And really, you'll tell us a bit more about what you do, but you've been really at the forefront in Canadian Parliament in terms of fighting anti-Semitism, racism. So if you can just share with us a bit about yourself and a bit about that, that would be really appreciated.
Sure. Well, first of all, Rabbi Puka, thank you very much for having me. As you and I both know, there is another Rabbi Puka who is one of the most prominent rabbis in Montreal, in my community, who's in my district of Mount Royal, and have a great relationship with him. And of course, he is also somebody who's a leader in this area. Basically, I worked as the general counsel of a multinational after school. When I finished my law degrees and my MBA, I was very lucky in the sense I got in at the ground floor of a company that was growing. I did that as well as being a city councilor and mayor of my city of Côte Saint-Luc until such time as I was elected as an MP in 2015. In the last parliament, I served as chairman of the Justice Committee of Parliament, which is sort of like the Judiciary Committee in the United States. And in this parliament, I'm the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Labor, so sort of like the Undersecretary of Labor for your American viewers. But here, members of Congress are actually in the executive branch doing things, not, we don't have that same separation of powers exactly like you have in the US. And one of the things I've always been focused on, because the district I represent is close to a third Jewish, has been the issue of anti-Semitism and the relationships between Canada and Israel. So I'm the president of the Canada-Israel Interparliamentary Friendship Group, and I have been at the forefront of hate legislation, and legislation is particularly looking at online hate. And I am working together with a group of parliamentarians across the world on an interparliamentary task force to tackle online anti-Semitism. And we issued our interim report just last week.
All right, so thank you. First of all, I'm honored because I also got to meet your counterpart, Congressman Jerry Nadler. So he's the House Judiciary Committee on the other side of the border. But it really sounds like phenomenal work you're doing, especially with the focus on online hate, which, you know, I think the US has much more to do and a farther way to come in terms of combating it. I want to share with you a quick conversation I had with a Toronto family, a 5-generation Toronto family, and they tell me they've been here, they never felt something like this in terms of anti-Semitism. They don't see things getting better or how the future is going to be safer for them. And they really feel unsafe in Canada in a way that you know, generationally they have not felt before. What's your message to, I assume, many families like that who are concerned about the rise in hate in Canada? What's your message about the present and the future?
So there's 2 things. Number one, after the conflict between Israel and Hamas, there's been a rise in escalation of anti-Semitism across the world. It's not only in Canada, it exists in the United States, it exists in Australia, it exists in the UK, and exists in much worse frameworks in other countries. Because Canada is one of the least anti-Semitic countries in the world, along with the US and Australia. So definitely there is a problem. And while I do agree that in our lifetime, this has probably been the most extreme examples of anti-Semitism that we have seen outside of college campuses. I don't know that it's, you know, going back many generations. I think my family is also a 5th or 6th generation Montreal family. What our great grandparents went through in the 1930s and the 1920s, when immigration was closed to Jews in Canada and the United States, pretty much based on the 1880 quotas, and we had quota systems in universities. And I mean, definitely it's not as bad as it was in the 20s and 30s. I mean, I don't want to go too extremes, but it's the worst that we've seen in my lifetime, and we need to tackle it. But on the whole, Canada is a country that is one of the best countries in the world for Jews to live in. I would not worry in the least about your future in Canada or about your safety in Canada, but we do need to tackle this extreme manifestation of anti-Semitism that is tied very much to a philosophy on the left that it is okay to conflate criticism of Judaism and Jews in the diaspora with actions of the state of Israel. And in the same way, we need to combat anti-Semitism on the far right, which is a neo-nationalist kind of anti-Semitism of a more historic type. But polls show, the Pew studies that are done across the world, show that the level of anti-Semitism, the number of Canadians who are anti-Semitic, is similar to Americans. It ranges between 9 and 11%. It's a tiny amount compared to the vast majority of countries in the world. So I don't want to over-exaggerate, but at the same time, I don't want to underemphasize the importance of tackling what is there now, and particularly the online variety of anti-Semitism that leads to 80% or more of the incidents that happen because anti-Semitism online can eventually move into the streets, as you see, for example, in what happened in Pittsburgh or Poway.
Yeah, thank you. That is definitely, when you take and compare it with the other countries, it's definitely a better situation here than in other places. You've been looking at anti-Semitism and hate online. What has been done already, and what do you think needs to be done?
So that's a great question, and not enough has been done. In Canada, as opposed to the United States, our charter allows for us to have laws against hate speech. And so we do have laws that the Supreme Court upheld in the late 1980s on a 5-4 vote in a case involving Jim Keegstra, who was an anti-Semitic teacher who was propagating Nazi Holocaust denial in his classrooms, that you are okay in Canada to have laws that are against hate speech, which means promoting hate against an identifiable group, and or promotion of genocide, or and that goes a little bit beyond the American experience, where the First Amendment is slightly more limiting, although you can certainly have laws that say you can't scream fire in a crowded theater and incite damage, imminent damage and imminent danger. So in Canada, we do have those laws, but the problem is social media companies are not respecting those laws. They're not taking off posts that are hate speech. So one of the policies the Canadian government has announced is we intend to put forward legislation that would require the social media providers to take down what would be illegal speech in Canada. But that doesn't resolve the question of the 98% of speech that is hateful, but not hate speech. And then that's a common problem in Canada and the United States, because these social media providers are not consistently applying their policies that they themselves have created, which would prohibit that speech on their platform. So we need to find a way across countries, Canada, the United States, the UK, Australia, all English-speaking countries, to deal with platform posts in our language anywhere in the world that would be hateful and in violation of the platform's own rules. And that's what we're looking towards. We're trying to find ways to say, for example, if you don't respect your own code of conduct and you don't take down stuff that's against your own code of conduct, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a regulator, for example, to watch you. We're going to ask you to be publicly accountable for your lack of transparency. And then there'll be consequences if you don't do that. We're going to ask you to disclose your algorithms that drive hate to hate. For example, in order to keep people on their platform, what happens is if you search for neo-Nazi content, instead of taking you to counter speech, they're taking you to neo-Nazi content to keep you on their platform. We need to stop that from happening. And in order to do that, we need to force them to publicly disclose exactly what they're doing to embarrass them. And then finally, we need to confront anti-Semitism as a type of disinformation online. It's the same as, people who are saying vaccines are there for the government to control your body. Everything we've seen so far is that anti-Semitism is a form of disinformation. So if you're inclined to believe QAnon conspiracy theories, that there's a pizzeria under DC,
Philadelphia or DC.
Yeah, that the Democrats and the media people are controlling and they're killing little children and doing pedophilia rings, then you very well may believe that Jews kill little Christian children for blood for matzah. I mean, it's that ridiculous. If you buy into this crazy worldview, then you'll buy into the anti-Semitic worldview. And so we need to treat anti-Semitism as a type of disinformation that often, by the way, is not coming from domestic sources. in Canada or the United States, but it's coming from Iran and coming from Russia in order to seed division within our countries. So we need to look at this as a national security issue also.
You mentioned, I know Iran has been a propagator of anti-Semitism. Is that also true for Russia? Russia has been explicitly directing hate and division?
So Iran itself, there's a little bit different. Iran, its supreme leader, puts up genocidal attacks on Israel on Twitter. And by the way, is not removed from Twitter, even though Trump was removed from Twitter, which is hard for me to understand or believe. But, not that Trump shouldn't have been removed, but Khamenei should be removed too. But Iran has people in Iran, supported by the government, no doubt, that are posting stuff trying to make you believe that it's a Canadian or an American posting it to try to sow division. And Russian bots and Russian people are doing the same thing. They're using, whether it's racism or anti-Semitism or other things that cause division within our society, they're trying to ferment that online. And you had tremendous examples of it in the 2020 American election, and 2016 American election, where Russia was attempting to, convince people not to vote and depress the vote, and all of these things feed into that. So yes, it's coming from Russia as well as coming from Iran.
You mentioned Iran, and while we're on it, because I do have a lot of Iranian followers, and especially in the Iranian resistance. You had the story of an Iranian journalist who was targeted in New York. The FBI thwarted the plot, but you have this increased boldness of the regime. And at the same time, you also have, I would say, in some ways, unprecedented uprising of the people of Iran. So what's your message to the people of Iran who are looking at the world and saying, where are you? We're up against a regime that's killing us, its own citizens.
Yeah, I mean, the Persian civilization is one of the greatest civilizations in the history of the world. And Iran has one of the most educated peoples in the world. And the fact that they are being brutalized and exploited by this type of regime that fosters a disdain for human rights in Iran, whether it's the treatment of the Baha'is or the treatment of women or the treatment of anybody that doesn't follow the zealots in the regime, or whether it's genocidal attacks on Israel, or whether it's fermentation of terrorism at home and abroad. I feel terrible for the people of Iran, and I strongly support those forces inside and outside of Iran that are seeking regime change in that country. And my hat's off to all of those people who are standing up to this regime, because it's very, very hard. And I understand how frustrating it must be that, that they don't see the world rushing to their defense. I think we've been burned in terms of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think, there's less desire for Western countries to now send troops and rush into wars in the Middle East, but it doesn't mean that the problems in Iran and the oppression facing the people are any less important. And, I do understand, the frustration.
Thank you. Just a bit of a funner topic, or not fun, but there was this whole Ben & Jerry's controversy over the past day. Ben & Jerry's saying they'll withdraw from selling in Judea and Samaria. What are your thoughts in terms of BDS and the way it impacts Jews in the diaspora, specifically on college campuses and in universities and academia?
Yeah, absolutely. So BDS is a new form of anti-Semitism. BDS is treating Israel differently than it treats other countries. If there's a universal movement to boycott, multiple different countries based on human rights issues, and Israel is on that list, I think maybe that's, something that people are doing in the spirit of human rights. When people uniquely focus on the democratic state of Israel and ignore the treatment of Uyghurs in China, and ignore the treatment of all minorities in Iran, and ignore what's going on in Mauritania, where there's human slavery. And I can go on and on about countries in the world that oppress people, and you focus uniquely on Israel, that is absolutely anti-Semitic. It's the only Jewish state in the world, and you're focused uniquely on it. And so it makes Jewish students and pro-Israel students who are not Jewish feel unsafe on college campuses. As our prime minister has said, it's part of the 3 Ds: the delegitimization, the demonization, of the state of Israel. And I've been proud of our prime minister Justin Trudeau, who's gone on college campuses and spoken out against BDS. And I continue to do so. And I deplore the action of Ben & Jerry's and its parent company Unilever in what they're doing. And we buy a lot of products from Unilever. And I would suggest to those people who do not agree with the action that they're taking to then use your own power and not buy from that company. I don't understand what suddenly caused this to happen, but it's disturbing. I mean, it really is quite disturbing.
And then I was wondering, King David says, "Sur merava se tov." Stay away from bad, but also do good. So I guess my question is to you, in terms of building more harmony between communities, Jews and Muslim, right and left, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, everyone. What is your vision in terms of building better relations in Canada between different communities so there's a more harmonious society?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we as Jewish Canadians need to set an example in terms of caring as much about what's happening to other minority groups as happens to us. And that means standing up for everybody's rights, whether it's Indigenous Canadians, whether it's Muslim Canadians who have been terrorized by the murders in London and the attacks on people who are visibly wearing Muslim dress in Canada, and who are equally disturbed and scared as Jewish Canadians over the rise in hate over the last month and a half. Or whether it's Christians who are seeing their churches burned down, or anybody else. If we want people to stand up for us, we need to stand up for others. In the same way that old Niemöller quote, that he did, we didn't speak up, and then they came for me, and there was nobody left to speak up. We better start speaking up for everybody before it's time to speak up for ourselves, because that's the only way we can expect others to also speak up for us. And we need to set an example. And I think, whether it's Tikkun Olam or it's whatever, message from the Jewish spirit is, we need to exemplify leadership in that area. And too often I hear Jews who are singularly focused on anti-Semitism, and we shouldn't be singularly focused on anti-Semitism and looking only at what's happening to us. We have to be open and care about what's happening to everybody else too. And so where we can unite, for example, Quebec, we have Bill 21 that equally discriminates against identifiable Jews and identifiable Muslims. And so, I've spoken out against that bill. It's a Quebec provincial bill. From the beginning, I organized a rally against it. And that brings together people from the Jewish and Muslim and Sikh and other communities who have people who are visibly dressed, whether it's with a kippah or whether it's with a hijab, because they're equally affected by a discriminatory law.
And I guess a question in terms of young Jews looking at you, you lead a very proud Jewish life. You don't hide who you are. You carry yourself with integrity, and you accomplish so much. What's your message to young Jews who may be shying away in light of the hate or whatever it may be that's going on out there? What's your message in terms of putting yourself out there and doing what you do?
Yeah, that we're lucky enough to live in a country, whether it's Canada or the United States, wherever your viewers are, I'm presuming most of them are in North America. We live in countries where we can be equal as Jews. We can be proud Canadians and proud Americans, and we can be proud Jews, and we don't have to differentiate between one and the other. We're equal citizens of countries that have recognized our communities for hundreds of years as equals. And there is no reason for you to shy away from being who you are and taking a prominent place in public life. You can rise to be president or prime minister or whatever in these countries and be proudly Jewish. And you see Kamala Harris, our vice president of the United States, her husband, Doug Emhoff, is Jewish, and he's the second gentleman of the United States. You have the majority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who's Jewish. You have two ministers in Canada, Karina Gould and Jim Carr, who are Jewish. You have myself and Rachel Ben-Dayan and Julie DeBruzen, who are parliamentary secretaries in Canada. Like you have people who are openly and proudly Jewish, and at the same time proudly American and Canadian. And you don't have to be in politics. You can be in sports, you can be in arts, you can be anywhere, and you can be successful, and you don't have to hide who you are. So that would be my message to young people.
I would add also, you have a new, I think, but Yara Sachs, right? Or is
Yeah.
she's also more
Actually, no,
recent.
there's other Jewish MPs. I was just listening to the ministers and the parliamentary secretaries,
Right.
but you have great other Jewish MPs like Yara Sachs, and you have people even in the other political party, in the Conservative Party, like Marty Moran's. Like you don't even have to, like most people perceive Jews are Democrats in the US and liberals in Canada, but there's Jews who are Republicans and conservatives. There's Jews who are in Canada and the NDP. There's Jews are in multiple political parties and can achieve success in any party. The important thing is whatever you do, you shouldn't forget who you are, and you shouldn't have to be forced to abandon who you are to achieve success. You don't need these days to change your name like you did 60 or 70 years ago to be in show business. You know, you don't need to hide your identity to be a CEO or to be a sports star or to be a politician. And that's important.
All right. Well, I really can't thank you enough. I mean, this is so meaningful in so many ways. My grandmother, who's thank God still alive, Grandma Cookie, she fled. They were German citizens living in China. And after the revolution there, they were completely stateless. And the place that took them in is Canada. So, you know, we're always very thankful. And it's an honor to have a proud Jewish MP and really to be able to have this conversation with you.
Pleasure to have it, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And keep up the good work.
Thanks. Have a great day.